go, now!
They're gaining on us.
This acquisition is critical. We need to finalize the terms by the end of the quarter, no exceptions.
The millionaire kicked out the black man, but what happened next shocked everyone. His father had worked long hours as a bus driver, and his mother balanced 2 jobs just to keep the household running. Money was always tight, but what his parents lacked in wealth, they made up for with lessons about perseverance, honesty, and never giving up on one's dreams. From a young age, James had been inspired by those lessons. He would spend hours reading about successful entrepreneurs, learning their stories, and imagining himself one day standing among them. By the time he was in his early 20s, James had developed a vision. He wanted to start his own business, something that could not only provide financial security for his family, but also create opportunities for others who had been overlooked in society. He had an idea for a tech startup that could simplify everyday tasks for small business owners, helping them manage their work efficiently without hiring expensive staff. It was an ambitious idea, and James knew that to turn it into reality, he would need funding and guidance from people who had already achieved success. After months of preparation, James finally secured a meeting with Edward Carlyle, a millionaire investor known for his sharp business instincts. Carlyle had a reputation for being tough, demanding, and sometimes unapproachable. Many had tried to pitch their ideas to him and failed, but James was confident. He believed that if he could just present his plan clearly with passion and sincerity, Carlyle would see the potential of his idea. On the day of the meeting, James dressed in his best suit. He wanted to make a strong first impression, even though he felt nervous. As he entered the luxurious lobby of Carlyle's office building, he could not help but notice the contrast between his modest background and the wealth that surrounded him. Marble floors reflected the bright chandeliers above, and polished brass elevators opened and closed with a soft, mechanical hum. Businessmen and women moved briskly around him, each absorbed in their own important matters. James felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. This was the moment he had worked so hard for, and he could not afford to let fear take over. He took a deep breath and approached the receptionist, explaining that he had a scheduled meeting with Mr. Carlyle. The receptionist nodded, typed something into her computer, and instructed him to wait in the lounge. James took a seat on a leather chair, trying to calm his racing heart. He reviewed his pitch in his mind over and over again, rehearsing the words, the tone, and the gestures. He imagined himself speaking confidently, answering questions with ease, and impressing Carlyle with his innovative idea. Yet, no matter how much he practiced, a part of him could not ignore the fear of rejection. Minutes felt like hours as he waited. Finally, a man in a tailored suit appeared. Edward Carlyle was taller than James expected, with sharp features and an air of authority that filled the room. His eyes scanned James from head to toe, and for a moment, James felt exposed, as if every doubt he had ever had about himself was being examined. Carlyle spoke with a firm, clipped voice, asking James to follow him into a private office. As they walked, James tried to maintain his composure. He reminded himself that he was here because he deserved to be, because he had worked for this moment. But as soon as Carlyle opened the door and gestured for him to sit, the atmosphere changed. The millionaire's expression was cold, almost dismissive. James began to explain his idea, outlining the potential market, the unique features of his product, and the benefits for small business owners. He spoke with clarity, passion, and confidence. Yet before he could finish, Carlyle interrupted. His tone was sharp, almost cutting. "I don't think this is going to work," he said, his eyes narrowing. "I don't see the potential here. You should leave." James was stunned. The words hit him like a sudden, freezing wave. He had prepared for tough questions, skeptical investors, and even polite rejections, but this was different. This was abrupt, dismissive, and humiliating. James tried to explain further, tried to persuade Carlyle to at least hear him out, but the millionaire's expression hardened. "Leave," Carlyle repeated more firmly this time. James swallowed hard, trying to hold back the sting of humiliation. He wanted to argue, to fight for his chance, but something in Carlyle's cold gaze made him pause. He realized that pressing further might only make the situation worse. With a heavy heart, James nodded, stood up, and walked out of the office. As he stepped back into the bustling lobby, James felt the weight of every eye in the room. He knew some were judging him, perhaps assuming that he did not belong there. The elevator doors closed behind him, and the rain outside mirrored his mood. Water dripped from his umbrella as he walked down the street, feeling small in the vastness of the city. His mind raced with questions. Had he failed because of his idea? Or was there something else, something deeper, that had caused this rejection? Despite the humiliation, James refused to let it crush him. He reminded himself that one person's judgment did not define his worth or the value of his idea. He thought about his parents, about the struggles they had overcome, and about the countless hours he had spent preparing for this moment. Deep down, he knew that rejection was a part of the journey, a stepping stone rather than a dead end. That evening, James returned to his small apartment. He sat at his desk, staring at the plans and notes that filled every corner of the room. The rain tapped against the window as he reflected on the day. He could feel the disappointment lingering in his chest, but alongside it was a quiet determination. He realized that if he wanted to succeed, he could not rely on anyone else's approval. He had to create his own opportunities, build his own path, and prove, not just to Carlyle but to himself and the world, that he was capable of achieving greatness. James spent the next few hours revisiting his business plan, refining every detail, and considering new ways to approach potential investors. He knew that the road ahead would be difficult. There would be more rejections, more moments of doubt, and countless obstacles. But he also knew that his vision was worth fighting for. He promised himself that he would continue pushing forward, no matter what, and that he would not let this single encounter define his journey. In the weeks that followed, James' encounter with Carlyle became a turning point in his life. It was a moment of pain, yes, but also a moment of clarity. He realized that true success would not come from seeking validation from those who doubted him, but from believing in himself, working tirelessly, and staying committed to his vision. The humiliation of that day became fuel for his ambition, igniting a determination that would guide him through every challenge ahead. James knew that the journey would be long and uncertain, but he was ready. He understood that life had a way of testing those who dared to dream, and he was determined to pass every test. With a heart full of resolve, he began the next chapter of his story, one where rejection would not define him, but perseverance, courage, and belief in his own potential would shape his destiny. After the humiliating encounter with Edward Carlyle, James Thompson refused to let his spirit break. He could still feel the sting of rejection, the sharp edge of embarrassment, but deep inside, he knew that giving up was not an option. That night, as rain continued to pour outside his small apartment window, James sat at his desk, looking at his business plan with fresh eyes. He had spent months perfecting it, and while Carlyle had dismissed him in mere minutes, James was determined to find someone who could see the potential he believed in. He started by reaching out to friends, colleagues, and mentors he had met over the years. Every phone call, every email, and every meeting became a chance to refine his presentation and sharpen his ideas. The rejections were relentless at first. Some investors claimed the market was too small, others said technology like his was not needed. Each refusal felt like a heavy weight, yet James kept moving forward. He reminded himself that every successful entrepreneur had faced setbacks before achieving their breakthrough. During this period, James realized that resilience alone would not be enough. He needed visibility. He decided to share his vision online, creating social media posts, short videos, and blog entries that explained how his startup could solve real problems for small businesses. He wanted to connect with people who understood the struggles of running a business on a limited budget. Slowly, his story began to gain attention. Business owners reached out to him, praising his ideas and asking for early access to his services. These messages were small victories, but to James, they were proof that he was on the right path. Even as he worked tirelessly on his business, James faced personal challenges. His family depended on him, and he had little money left after investing in the early stages of his startup. Some nights, he went to bed hungry or skipped meals to save money for software tools, marketing campaigns, or essential equipment. Friends and acquaintances questioned his choices, asking why he didn't take a safer job or a stable paycheck. But James remained steadfast. He knew that success rarely came from comfort zones, and he was willing to sacrifice for his dreams. One afternoon, after another failed pitch to a potential investor, James sat alone in a small cafe, feeling exhausted. He watched people rush by on the streets outside, wondering if anyone else faced the same struggles he did. The thought of Carlyle's dismissive eyes flashed in his mind, and he felt a wave of anger. Not the kind that would lead to revenge, but the kind that fueled determination. He realized that he would not let one person's judgment define his worth or limit his potential. The memory of being kicked out of Carlyle's office became a reminder that the world could be harsh, but his belief in himself had to be stronger. As weeks turned into months, James' efforts began to show results. He started networking more aggressively, attending conferences, workshops, and local business events. Each event was an opportunity to learn, to improve, and to find someone willing to take a chance on him. He faced skepticism at every turn, but he also met individuals who were inspired by his story, people who had experienced rejection themselves and could see the determination shining in his eyes. Slowly but surely, James built a small network of supporters who believed in his vision. The turning point came when he connected with a mid-level investor, Maria Sanchez, who had a reputation for nurturing startups overlooked by traditional funding sources. Maria listened patiently as James presented his idea again, answering every question with clarity and honesty. Unlike Carlyle, she saw the potential and the hard work James had invested. She appreciated not only the idea but the persistence and integrity behind it. Maria decided to invest in his startup, providing both the funding and the mentorship James desperately needed. It was a breakthrough moment. With funding secured, James could finally begin implementing his vision on a larger scale. He hired a small team, including developers and marketers who shared his enthusiasm for helping small businesses. Together, they worked tirelessly, often late into the night, refining the product, testing new features, and gathering feedback from early users. Each small success, from a positive review to an increase in user engagement, boosted James' confidence and fueled his drive. The company began gaining momentum, and word started to spread beyond the small circle of initial users. James also used his growing platform to share his personal story. He talked openly about the rejection from Carlyle, the struggles he faced while starting out, and the importance of resilience and self-belief. His honesty resonated with many people, particularly young entrepreneurs and professionals who had faced similar obstacles. Comments and messages poured in from people thanking him for the inspiration and encouragement. James realized that his story was not only about building a business, but also about empowering others to pursue their dreams, regardless of the obstacles in their path. Despite this progress, challenges continued to arise. Competitors in the tech industry were quick to adapt and copy ideas. Unexpected technical problems threatened deadlines, and there were moments when funding seemed insufficient to keep the team together. James faced sleepless nights filled with worry and doubt, wondering if he had made the right choices. But each time he reminded himself why he started this journey. He remembered the humiliation of being kicked out by Carlyle and the countless hours he had spent working toward this dream. Those memories became fuel for his determination, pushing him to find solutions rather than succumb to despair. James also learned the value of humility and collaboration during this period. He began listening more closely to his team, valuing their input and sharing responsibilities. He discovered that leadership was not about being the smartest person in the room, but about guiding and motivating others to reach their full potential. His team responded with loyalty and creativity, and together, they began achieving milestones that once seemed impossible. From launching a functional beta version of the software to securing new clients, every achievement was a step closer to realizing the dream James had nurtured for years. Social media continued to play a critical role in amplifying James' story. Videos, blog posts, and interviews highlighted his journey, the obstacles he had overcome, and the innovative solutions his startup offered. People admired not only his business acumen, but also his integrity and perseverance. Invitations to speak at events and conferences began to arrive, giving James a platform to inspire a larger audience. Every time he shared his story, he reminded people that rejection and failure were not the end. They were opportunities to grow stronger and wiser. Through all of this, James remained grounded. He never forgot his family, his humble beginnings, or the lessons his parents had instilled in him. He made sure to support others who were struggling, offering guidance and encouragement whenever possible. He believed that success was not measured solely by wealth or recognition, but by the positive impact one could make on the lives of others. And slowly, through dedication, honesty, and hard work, James' startup began turning into a thriving business, with clients praising the product, investors showing interest, and a growing team committed to the mission. By the end of the year, James had achieved what once seemed impossible. His startup was gaining recognition, and the small circle of supporters had grown into a strong network of investors, mentors, and loyal customers. The humiliation he had felt in Carlyle's office had transformed into motivation, and the pain of rejection had become a stepping stone toward success. James now understood that life's obstacles were not there to stop him. They were there to teach him resilience, patience, and the importance of believing in oneself. The story of James Thompson during these months was not only about business success, but also about personal growth. He learned to handle criticism, face setbacks, and maintain hope even when the odds seemed impossible. Every rejection became a lesson, every failure a chance to improve, and every small victory a reason to keep moving forward. His journey inspired not only his team and supporters, but also thousands of people online who followed his story, seeing in James the proof that determination, courage, and hard work could overcome almost any challenge. And through it all, one thought stayed with James. He would never forget the day Carlyle had kicked him out. It was a painful memory, yes, but also a constant reminder that the world could be unfair. And it was precisely this unfairness that drove him to prove that he could rise above it. The humiliation had planted a seed of determination, which grew into a driving force powerful enough to overcome every obstacle in his path. James had discovered that true strength came not from avoiding challenges, but from facing them head-on, learning from them, and never letting them define his potential. Months passed since James Thompson's startup had begun gaining traction, and what once seemed impossible was slowly becoming real. Each day brought new challenges, yet also new victories. James had learned that building a business was not a straight path. It was full of twists, setbacks, and unexpected surprises. But he no longer feared obstacles. He had learned to face them head-on, using every difficulty as a chance to grow stronger. James' company had started with a small team of passionate individuals who shared his vision. Together, they worked tirelessly to improve the software, adding features that addressed real problems faced by small business owners. The first version of the product had been simple, but with feedback from early users, they began making it more sophisticated and user-friendly. Each success built confidence, and each small victory brought James closer to proving that his idea was valuable, not just to investors, but to people who needed it most. Despite these achievements, James never forgot the humiliation he had felt months earlier when Edward Carlyle had dismissed him so coldly. That moment had once seemed like a wall he could not climb, a door that would never open. But now, as James reviewed his company's growing list of clients, positive reviews, and increasing revenue, he felt a quiet satisfaction. The very same person who had once refused to even listen to him would soon have to see the result of his hard work. The opportunity came sooner than James expected. One morning, as he prepared for a local business conference where he had been invited to speak, he noticed a familiar name on the attendee list, Edward Carlyle. James' heart raced. He could feel the old anger, the sting of humiliation, and the tension building inside him. But this time, it was different. He was no longer the young man who had walked out of Carlyle's office feeling powerless. He was now an accomplished entrepreneur with a growing business and the confidence to stand tall. At the conference, James delivered a presentation that captivated the audience. He spoke about his journey, the challenges of starting a business from scratch, and the importance of persistence in the face of rejection. He shared lessons he had learned, not only about business but about life. People listened intently, inspired by the honesty and humility in his words. Every eye in the room followed him, hanging on every detail of the story that had once been just his secret struggle. When the session ended, James stepped down from the stage, feeling a mix of pride and nervous anticipation. He knew Carlyle was somewhere in the audience, but he was determined not to let old fears take over. The chance to prove himself had arrived, not through confrontation or revenge, but by showing what he had built with his own hands. James approached Carlyle calmly, extending his hand. The millionaire looked at him, surprised and uncertain, as if trying to reconcile the man before him with the memory of the young entrepreneur he had once dismissed. "Mr. Carlyle," James said with a calm but confident tone, "it's been a while. I wanted to show you what I've been working on." Carlyle took a moment, studying James carefully. The man before him was not only confident but composed, successful, and self-assured. He could see the result of the hard work, dedication, and perseverance that he had once underestimated. There was a mixture of respect and shock in Carlyle's eyes, a recognition that James had succeeded where others had doubted him. James began explaining the achievements of his company, highlighting how the software had helped hundreds of small businesses manage their operations more efficiently. He shared statistics, success stories, and testimonials from grateful clients who had seen tangible improvements in their daily operations. Every word reinforced the fact that this was not luck, not chance, but the result of relentless effort, resilience, and intelligent decision-making. Carlyle listened quietly, nodding occasionally, but it was clear that he had not expected this. As James finished his explanation, the room seemed to hold its breath. Audience members whispered to each other, clearly impressed by the story of perseverance and triumph. The millionaire investor, who had once dismissed him with a simple "leave," now faced undeniable proof of James' capability and potential. The young man he had once underestimated was now a successful entrepreneur, admired by peers and respected by clients. Instead of feeling the old bitterness, James felt a sense of peace. The humiliation that had once haunted him had been transformed into a source of strength. He realized that his true victory was not in proving Carlyle wrong, but in the journey he had undertaken, the lessons he had learned, and the lives he had already begun to impact through his work. The story that had once been painful was now a source of inspiration for him, for his team, and for everyone listening. Carlyle finally spoke, his tone measured, revealing a mixture of surprise and respect. "James, I must admit I did not expect this. You have built something remarkable." There was no hint of arrogance in his words, only acknowledgement. James smiled politely. He did not need praise, but the recognition was a quiet validation of the months of struggle, sleepless nights, and countless setbacks. The encounter marked a turning point for James, not because Carlyle had acknowledged him, but because it symbolized the broader truth he had learned. Success is earned through perseverance, integrity, and the refusal to give up. Rejection and doubt are temporary obstacles, but the lessons learned along the way are permanent. James realized that anyone could face dismissal, humiliation, or disbelief. But the way forward is to keep moving, to keep believing, and to continue working toward one's goals, regardless of who doubts you. Following the conference, James' story began to reach an even wider audience. Media outlets picked up the tale of a young entrepreneur who had been rejected by a millionaire, but went on to achieve extraordinary success. Interviews, articles, and social media coverage amplified his journey, inspiring thousands of others who had faced similar setbacks. People resonated with his honesty, determination, and the way he had turned failure into a stepping stone toward greatness. The impact of this exposure was immediate. New clients reached out, investors became interested, and James' company began expanding at a faster pace than ever before. He hired additional staff, implemented new features, and invested in marketing strategies that increased visibility and reach. The company grew from a small startup to a recognized brand in its industry, and James became a figure admired not only for his business acumen, but also for his resilience, humility, and inspiring story. Even with all the success, James remained grounded. He never forgot the journey that had brought him here, the long hours of work, the financial struggles, the rejections, and the sleepless nights. He continued mentoring young entrepreneurs, speaking at events, and sharing the lessons he had learned. He emphasized that true success is not just about wealth or recognition, but about persistence, integrity, and the positive impact one can make on others' lives. Looking back, James realized that being kicked out by Carlyle had been a hidden blessing. That rejection had forced him to dig deeper, work harder, and prove his own capabilities. Without it, he might not have discovered the full extent of his determination and resilience. The painful memory had become a guiding light, reminding him that obstacles are not roadblocks but opportunities for growth, and that perseverance, belief in oneself, and hard work are the true keys to success. By the end of this chapter of his life, James had not only achieved remarkable professional success, but also personal growth. He had transformed humiliation into motivation, rejection into opportunity, and doubt into confidence. He had proven that no single person, no matter how influential, could define his worth or limit his potential. James Thompson had become more than just a successful entrepreneur. He had become a symbol of perseverance, inspiration, and the power of believing in oneself, regardless of the challenges faced along the way. And as he looked toward the future, James understood that this was only the beginning. More challenges awaited, more opportunities to innovate, and more lives to inspire. But he was ready. With his vision, determination, and the lessons learned from every setback, James was confident that nothing could stop him from achieving even greater heights. The story of being kicked out by Carlyle had transformed from a moment of shame into a cornerstone of his journey, a reminder that adversity is often the first step toward greatness. The success James Thompson had worked so tirelessly for was no longer just a dream. It was reality. His startup had grown beyond what he had imagined in the earliest days of struggle. From the small apartment where he had once spent long nights working alone, James now had a bustling office, a dedicated team, and a growing list of clients who relied on his software every day. Yet despite all the tangible success, James never lost sight of what had brought him to this point. The resilience, determination, and belief in himself that had guided him through every rejection, every setback, and every moment of doubt. One sunny morning, James received an unexpected invitation to speak at a prestigious international business summit. The event promised exposure to some of the world's leading entrepreneurs, investors, and innovators. He knew this was more than an opportunity for publicity. It was a platform to inspire others with his story. As he prepared for his speech, James reflected on the journey that had brought him here. The memory of Edward Carlyle, the millionaire who had once kicked him out of his office without listening, lingered in his mind. But this time, the feeling was different. There was no bitterness, only a quiet satisfaction and a readiness to share his experiences openly. When the day of the summit arrived, James stepped onto the stage, greeted by applause from a large audience. Cameras flashed and microphones captured every word he spoke. He began by talking about his background, growing up in a modest neighborhood, witnessing the sacrifices his parents made, and the lessons of perseverance and integrity they had instilled in him. He described the idea for his startup, the long hours of research and planning, and the countless obstacles he had faced along the way. Then came the story that everyone had been waiting for, the day he had met Edward Carlyle. James recounted it honestly, without anger or resentment. He described walking into the luxurious office, filled with hope and nerves, only to be dismissed in a moment. He spoke about the humiliation and doubt he had felt, and how, in that moment, he could have given up. But instead, he chose to work harder, to refine his ideas, and to find someone who would believe in him. The audience listened intently, captivated by the authenticity and courage in James' words. As he spoke, James emphasized the lessons he had learned from that rejection. He explained that setbacks are not the end. They are opportunities to grow, to reassess, and to push forward. Every obstacle, he said, is a test of character and determination. The story of being kicked out of Carlyle's office became not a tale of shame, but a powerful example of how persistence and belief in oneself can transform a moment of defeat into a stepping stone for success. People in the audience nodded, some wiping away tears, inspired by the journey of someone who had turned adversity into triumph. After his speech, James was approached by countless attendees who wanted to hear more about his journey. Among them, he noticed a familiar figure, Edward Carlyle himself. The millionaire had attended the summit, and now he stood before James, a mixture of surprise and admiration on his face. For the first time, James saw Carlyle not as a symbol of rejection, but as a witness to the result of his perseverance. Carlyle extended his hand, acknowledging James' success with a nod. There was no arrogance, no judgment, only recognition of what James had achieved through hard work and resilience. Instead of reliving the past or seeking validation, James chose to embrace the moment with grace. He shook Carlyle's hand and offered a warm smile. It was a gesture of closure, a demonstration that true strength is measured not by how one responds to rejection, but by how one rises above it. The audience, witnessing this interaction, erupted in applause. They saw a young man who had been doubted and dismissed, now standing tall, confident, and successful, not through revenge, but through determination and integrity. The summit brought new opportunities for James. Investors, impressed by his story and the growth of his company, approached him with offers of collaboration, partnerships, and funding for expansion. His company began reaching clients internationally, expanding beyond his initial vision. More importantly, James' story inspired others, young entrepreneurs, professionals facing obstacles, and people who had ever been told they were not good enough. He became a symbol of hope and perseverance, proving that determination, hard work, and self-belief can overcome even the harshest setbacks. Through all this success, James remained humble and grounded. He never forgot the struggles of his early days, the nights of uncertainty, the lack of money, the repeated rejections. He remembered the feeling of walking out of Carlyle's office, the sting of humiliation, and the fear of failure. But instead of letting these memories weigh him down, he used them as fuel to keep pushing forward. Each challenge he faced reinforced his resilience, and each small victory reminded him that perseverance pays off. James also dedicated time to mentoring and supporting others. He created programs to help young entrepreneurs from underprivileged backgrounds, offering guidance, resources, and encouragement. He spoke at schools, community centers, and business events, sharing the story of his journey and emphasizing the importance of integrity, perseverance, and resilience. He wanted others to understand that rejection is not a reflection of one's worth, and failure is not permanent. It is a stepping stone toward success. As his company grew, James also prioritized building a strong team culture. He encouraged collaboration, innovation, and open communication, ensuring that every member of his team felt valued and empowered. He knew that a successful business is not just about profits, but about people, the clients it serves, the employees who contribute, and the community it impacts. His leadership style became a model for others, showing that success combined with humility and empathy creates lasting impact. Years after that fateful encounter with Carlyle, James reflected on his journey. He realized that the humiliation he had once felt had been a crucial part of his growth. Being dismissed had forced him to dig deeper, to work harder, and to prove to himself, not just to anyone else, what he was capable of. The rejection had been painful, but it had also been transformative. It taught him resilience, patience, and the power of self-belief. It reminded him that true success is built not by avoiding failure, but by embracing challenges and learning from them. The story of James Thompson reached far and wide, inspiring countless people around the world. He became a symbol of hope for anyone who had faced doubt, rejection, or failure. People admired not only his achievements, but also his approach to life. The way he handled setbacks with grace, how he remained humble despite success, and how he used his influence to uplift others. His journey proved that determination, integrity, and perseverance are far more powerful than luck or privilege. And though James had achieved incredible professional success, he knew the true reward lay in the journey itself. Every struggle, every sleepless night, and every moment of doubt had shaped him into the person he had become. He understood that life would continue to present challenges, but he was now equipped with the strength, wisdom, and experience to face them confidently. Success was no longer a distant dream. It was a testament to the power of resilience, hard work, and self-belief. As James looked out over the city from his office window, he thought about how far he had come. The young man who had once been kicked out of a millionaire's office, feeling powerless and humiliated, was now a leader, an inspiration, and a testament to what is possible when determination meets action. The journey had not been easy, but it had been worth every struggle, every tear, and every sacrifice. In the end, the story of James Thompson was not just about business success. It was about life, resilience, and the human spirit. It was about turning rejection into opportunity, pain into motivation, and doubt into determination. It was about proving, not to anyone else but to oneself, that no obstacle is too great, no setback too final, and no dream too big. James' story reminded the world that the greatest victories often come after the hardest battles, and that perseverance, courage, and belief in oneself are the true measures of success. And so, the man who had once been dismissed and underestimated became a beacon of hope for others. His journey showed that failure is never final, rejection is never the end, and adversity is never permanent. It is the way we respond, the way we rise, and the way we continue moving forward that defines our path. James Thompson had turned his moment of humiliation into a life of triumph, inspiration, and lasting impact, a story that would continue to motivate generations to come.